My name is Mark Graham. I'm a professor at the University of Oxford, a visiting researcher at the Berlin Social Science Centre, and I'm the director of the Fairwork Project. Thanks very much for inviting me to speak with you today about the gig economy and attempts to tame it. So let's just unpack what I mean by the gig economy. Usually in most countries, it's taken to mean some combination of relatively short-term jobs, work outside of the employment relationship, and work that's mediated by a centralized digital platform. Now, casual on-demand gig work isn't a new phenomenon. The gig economy as we know it today has multiple enabling factors. What's really new, though, is the platform. If you look at what platforms actually do, you see that there's a spectrum of the types of control that they exert that ranges from what's effectively a misclassified employment relationship, so the likes of Uber, where the platform requires workers to be in particular places at particular times, to something more akin to the Yellow Pages, in which the platform's a directory for clients and workers just trying to find each other. Now, how is all of this platform work experienced by workers? Well, the press releases and the lobbying done by platforms foreground stories like the one that you see on the right of your screen. It's flexible, it's empowering, it creates jobs. But that's only part of the picture. Now, platforms are right. Workers do value flexibility, but that flexibility has a dark side, and there are a whole variety of risks and harms that gig workers all over the world face. So let me start with pay. The elemental rationale for platforms to use the gig economy model is to lower costs. And when workers are classified as independent contractors, it's legal to pay gig workers below the minimum wage, it's possible to pay workers below the minimum wage, and so there are many workers who end up getting paid below the minimum wage. Second, working conditions. A lot of gig work is inherently risky. Delivery drivers weave in and out of traffic all day. Ride-hail drivers are frequently assaulted. Cleaning and care gig workers, who are usually women, also have significant risks associated with going into people's homes. And workers are just on their own if something goes wrong. And if you can't work, you get no income. Now, COVID has only amplified these risks. Workers face a double precarity: the risk of illness by doing jobs that can't really be done in a socially distanced way, and the financial risks of losing your livelihood with no safety net and no sick pay if you're struck down by the virus. Third, management. There's usually no due process when it comes to disciplinary or dismissal procedures. Workers who depend on a platform can be kicked off the app if they get low ratings. And there's a lot of research out there showing that women and ethnic minorities tend to get worse ratings because platforms end up reflecting and reproducing societal biases that manifest through them. And finally, individualization. So workers in most sectors don't have the sort of collective associational structural power that we see in other sectors of the economy. So they're in a structurally weak bargaining position. These are the problems then. Why then has it been so hard to do anything about them? Well, part of the problem is that platform companies sit at this conjuncture of organizational forms. They're part firm, part market, part network, part infrastructure. In most countries, platforms claim that their role is to simply connect workers and consumers. And so if you see platforms through this lens, you could see why Uber in most countries claim not to pay their workers. To them, they provide a service to the drivers, which is matching them with customers, and so drivers pay them rather than the other way around. Now, what courts and regulators all over the world are starting to say is that a lot, not all, but a lot of platforms are just engaging in a misclassification of their workforce. So that's the platform's upside down narrative, that workers pay platforms rather than platforms pay workers, but courts and regulators are ruling repeatedly that that's a fiction. Now, the problem that remains is twofold. First of all, there's always going to be organizational forms in the gig economy that are just not resonant with a model in which the platform is an employer. Second, even where misclassification used to exist, platforms can react to rulings by not reclassifying workers as employees, but by changing their model to make sure that workers fall just on the other side of that employee line. They can invest a lot of money and a lot of effort in trying to ensure that however employment is defined, it doesn't apply to them. The other reason that it's been so hard to tame platforms has been the fact that they're simultaneously an urban infrastructure and at the same time they have this virtual ephemeral form. This manifests in four ways. So first of all, through their spatial reach. In many cases, workers have to sign contracts with companies that are based in other countries. Uber do this all over the world. So for example, if you're an Uber driver in South Africa, If you want to appeal, for instance, being deactivated in the courts, you have to do that in the Netherlands, not in South Africa, because you sign a contract with Uber International, based in the Netherlands. Now, companies are shielded from legal challenges in this way. Second, through extraterritoriality. The platform Upwork, for instance, it operates literally everywhere. It sets a global minimum wage of $3 an hour, but that $3 minimum, it applies to workers in Ghana just as much as it does to workers in Germany. Third, ephemerality. So when in Austin, Texas, the city government imposed new regulations for ride-hail services, what Uber did was just turn themselves off rather than comply. They threatened to do the same thing in London a few years ago. Now, they can do this precisely because of the platform model that they use. No employees, no fixed capital. Fourth, almost all platform work is highly decentralized. There are important exceptions, but the vast majority of platform workers are individualized and unorganized. Now, this makes it much easier for platforms to unilaterally lower pay rates, remove benefits, or degrade working conditions. So the point is that it's those conjunctures that makes it hard to tame platforms. They're an infrastructure without material infrastructure. They're a firm without employees. They can extract rents from urban interactions without any sort of presence in the cities in which they're doing that. But this unfixity that they have, it comes at a cost. They're fixed in one very important way, and that's in their virtual presence. There's an extremely low cost for both consumers and for workers to switch platform. And this basic fact makes them highly attuned to public opinion. So even though they don't have to facilitate fair working conditions, they're able to. And it's from that basic idea that we started the Fairwork Project. What we do is we show how and we show whether platforms live up to minimum standards of fairness, and we show where they fall short. Now, the project is based in between the University of Oxford and the Berlin Social Science Center, and it collaborates with partners in over 20 countries. So here's our partners represented on a map. In each one of these countries, we're working to evaluate the conditions of work in the local platform economy. Here you can see the funders who've supported the project, the ESRC, the ERC, the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, and the Ford Foundation. Now, our first objective was to develop principles of fair platform work, and we did this with representatives from industry, labor, and government in workshops that the ILO hosted in Geneva. Our five principles cover fair pay, fair conditions, fair contracts, fair management, and fair representation. We collect data through a triangulation of methods, desk research to examine contracts and terms of service, worker interviews to understand risks and harms on each platform, and then we approach platforms for evidence. We ask them if they believe that they can evidence any of the principles. Where a platform achieves one of the principles, we give them a 1 point out of 10 on that particular threshold. Where they don't, we keep them at a 0. Now, where there's a 1, what we do is we publicly tell the world why we've given the platform that point. Where there's a 0, we don't say anything about it. And what this means is that a 0 can either mean not achieved or it can mean no data. And doing things in this way, it allows us to score platforms that don't want to participate. So we don't allow them to opt out of scoring. Everyone gets scored. Now, we then assign every platform a score and a scorecard, and we put each one of these on our website. Here are 2 examples, one from Germany, one from Ecuador. What we do with these scores is we put them on a national league table. And by comparing platforms publicly, we create some competitive pressure. None of them want to be at the bottom of the table. What impacts has this had? Well, here's the founder of one of India's largest platforms, Zomato, going public on social media after we released our year 2 scores in India last December. He went public to say that they're going to do more to improve their scores and thereby improve working conditions. Now, this is a company that operates in 10,000 cities. It has 80 million users and it has at least a few 100,000 workers. This is the reaction that we're trying to encourage amongst the companies that don't currently score well in the rankings. So ultimately, this is still a young project, but already we've seen companies being willing to make real tangible changes to policies so that they improve their scores. In Germany, we've had some success getting anti-discrimination policies introduced. In India, we've gotten a platform to make sure that contracts are in local languages, and we've gotten them to introduce a meaningful non-discrimination policy. In South Africa, we've had companies agree to introduce a minimum wage floor, and one company even introduced a living wage floor after discussions with us. So we're also developing a pledge that we're asking governments, companies, and other actors to sign, a pledge to work with better scoring platforms and avoid worse scoring platforms. Organizations who sign the pledge, they get to use our logo. The aim ultimately is to create that extra bit of incentive for poor scoring platforms to do better. So at the end of the day, this is a project that is really just doing a simple thing. We're shedding light on working conditions in the gig economy and shedding light on where platforms fall short. And also hopefully shedding light on the fact that there's really nothing inevitable about harmful, degraded, unfair jobs in the platform economy. So thanks very much for listening, and I hope you all have a very productive rest of the summit.